a lot of us, I've done this myself,
Hmm.
like someone is in a higher position than I am, and
Hmm.
I would think I'm qualified. I
Hmm.
have the exact same things, if
Hmm.
not more, than this
Right.
person. So
Right.
why is this person above me? What's good, y'all? Welcome back to episode 3 of our podcast, Pop 1021, Powerful Optical Perspective. You heard us, you loved us, you love us still, maybe. If you haven't heard about us, well, here we are.
Okay.
Before we get started with this episode, we have a special guest to the side of us. We have two actually,
Oh,
but our main special guest is to the side of us. So, who are you?
hello. My name is Anthony. I am one of Mario's friends. I hope he thinks I'm a friend. I love him so much. He's great. Uh, but yeah, I'm. He invited me on this podcast today. We did one previously. I'm in ministry full time. Um, I need a job, guys. If you can help me get another job that pays the bills, that'd be great. But yeah, I just love talking about this kind of stuff. I love talking about things that affect not only the church, but affect people in general, our society in general, um, because it's important. It's important for us to have rational, tame, and just things that are helpful. I feel like a lot of advice out there is not actually helpful. It just encourages like selfishness. So I think this is gonna be great. Yeah.
Definitely. So you
Yeah.
talked about
Hmm.
encouraging.
Yeah.
So we're talking about authority, especially
Yes.
with this time of day. And by the time this is being posted, well, elections is going to be happening. So
Mm-hmm.
whether you like it or not, presidentials, authority, this is a heavy topic.
Yeah.
And especially in American culture, I'm
Yes.
someone that falls into this category as well,
Hmm.
that I have a hard time submitting to authority.
Same.
So
Yeah.
so before we start into that,
Yeah.
like what is our definition of authority?
Alrighty. So I believe the authority is, I can see authority in two different ways, but I think we were talking about authority being like a position given, someone who is in charge, someone who is like a teacher or a police officer, someone who has the who has been either selected or appointed to keep order in any given space, whatever the realm that they're a part of.
Definitely. So
Right.
you can think
Yeah.
of like a policeman.
Yeah.
That's a great example. Is like when you
Mhm.
see a policeman with a badge, you know not to mess around with them unless they're
Yeah.
crazy, but you don't mess
Unless you
around with
want
them.
trouble,
Yeah,
yeah.
unless you want trouble.
Unless you want
And then if
trouble.
you see that same person that
Yeah.
doesn't have that badge,
Hmm.
you're less likely
Right.
to be more professional around them.
Right. Right. Exactly. So I think authority, like you said, authority is difficult, especially in our Western super hyper individualistic kind of mindset. But also I think just bad examples of authority. Like I know I fall in that category as well. Um, I only recently have like accepted that authority is a good thing. I've been working on it. I've been not recently as in like last week, but as in like the last couple of years. Just understanding that it really is a good thing and that it really is necessary. It's necessary. And no matter um two things can be true at the same time. You can like authority can be bad and it can hurt you, right? But that doesn't mean that authority is a bad thing in and of itself, right? So
That is true. And
yeah.
a lot of times when we think of something that's bad, that
Mhm.
is because it doesn't align with something that we believe in or something that we're doing.
Right,
So,
right. So like I think of authority as being also something that isn't necessarily, I know you're a teacher, right? So I
right.
feel like you see sometimes even within kids, authority isn't necessarily a position. Authority is sometimes an influence that
Mhm.
people naturally tend to carry, right?
Mhm.
So I work with kids as well, and you can see like there's always one or two kids that the other kids kind of like follow and group around, and like they for whatever reason, sometimes it doesn't make any sense. That's like the person that the other kids listen to. Like that's the kid that
That's the
like
ringleader.
that's
That's the
the ringleader,
go-to.
exactly. And I feel like that's another important topic to talk about when it comes to authority. Sometimes it's a position that is given because of the traits that you see in the person. And I think that's the most healthy version of authority, right? Having some kind of mentor figure, someone in your life that you can trust has the best intentions, right? Not necessarily saying kids have the best intentions when they're leading other kids, but there is something to say about having a natural sense of authority about yourself that other people can kind of follow into.
Definitely. It feels a lot easier too, kind of
Yeah.
going with that authority and like the hierarchical
Yeah.
aspect of things. Is
Right.
that when you don't know what to do, you can always turn to someone that's above you. It's like,
Yes.
hey, I need help, especially with teaching. It's
Oh,
like
of course.
you can talk to a principal. It's like,
Hmm.
hey, there's a situation that happened with the
Hmm.
student. I
Hmm.
don't know what I'm supposed to do.
Right.
These are my options. These are some ideas I have.
Hmm.
What is the best possible solution?
Right.
And the principal is there for a reason,
Hmm.
whether we like what they do or we don't like what they do.
Right.
And that's a tough thing too to think
Yeah,
about. Is that
definitely.
a lot of us, I've done this myself,
Hmm.
like someone is in a higher position than I am, and
Hmm.
I would think I'm qualified. I
Hmm.
have the exact same things, if
Hmm.
not more, than this
Right.
person. So
Right.
why is this person above me?
Hmm.
And usually I get that answer real quick is like, oh, I'm not as patient. I'm
Hmm.
a lot more prideful than
Hmm.
humble. So
Hmm. Yeah, and I think it just goes back to too, like, um, sometimes people are in a position, it's not necessarily that they're better than you. I think that's why a lot of us have trauma when it comes to authority figures, right? Like, just speaking from my own personal experience, um, I had a problem with authority mainly because of my parents and who they were.
mm,
You know, you believe and you trust that they have your best interest in mind, but when they show you over and over again, you start to question that authority,
mm,
right?
mm,
And then it transfers over. Like, surprise, surprise, we're also Christians and we have a lot of church things that we deal with too. Um, and I know for me, first, like the first church that I've ever was a part of, I have a lot of issues with the authority there, a lot of bad exampleship, a lot of very bad situations that happened that made me even more weary of leadership. It made me even more weary of authority. Um, but like you said, like two things can be true, or like I've talked about, two things can be true at the same time. Like that authority figure can be wrong,
mm,
but that doesn't mean that authority in general is wrong, right?
right.
Having that some kind of organizational system in place, it's what keeps everyone kind of on the same page and it keeps us together, right? So like you were saying with a principal, right? A principal is an authority, maybe they don't have the most experience, maybe they don't actually know what's going on at your level as a teacher, right? Maybe they don't know what's going on, but they're the person who, if that's not their job, their job is to keep order,
Mm,
as best as they can. And we don't always like it, we don't always agree with it, but unfortunately, someone has to make that decision,
right.
right? And someone who has a different perspective.
Mm,
I know for me personally, as I've kind of been in church still, and I've been raising in the positions that I've been doing. Um, I will say, like, a lot of people don't like me now because of that, but at the same time, people don't see on the back end the things that I see. I unfortunately have to make decisions that people don't like because I need to do what's best for the overall,
right.
right? And so it's unpopular, but it's someone has to make that decision, unfortunately, you know.
True. If you look at
Mhm.
Jesus, Jesus was pretty
Oh,
unpopular,
for
and he
sure.
was preaching the truth since day one.
Exactly, exactly. Since day one, he was preaching the truth. So
Yeah, amen. That's all we got to say. Thank you
I
guys.
know.
No,
Just kidding.
but you reminded me of John Maxwell. He talks
Hmm.
about it. I think this is I didn't know if it was John Bavaria or Maxwell, probably
Hmm.
both.
Hmm.
But Maxwell talks about him being a people pleaser
Hmm.
at a time, and I fall for this. A lot of
Hmm.
us fall into like this people pleasing that we
Of
want to make
course.
sure everyone is happy,
Hmm.
and that's impossible. It's
Oh, of course.
doable, but it's not worth it in the
Hmm.
long run.
Right.
So John Maxwell, I think it was an example where he was leading the church
Hmm.
and people would put in comments like, "Oh, this isn't good. You should try this."
Hmm.
So he would do that,
Right.
and he would just constantly adjust the church to please people.
Right.
And at the end of the day, he realized they're just they're just comments, they're
Hmm.
opinions.
Hmm.
Is it following? Well, obviously with the church, is it following God's
Hmm.
plan or is
Right.
it human led? You know?
Right. Right, exactly. And if you're living to please the crowd, you'll also die by their criticism. It's
Mhm.
something that I've always lived my life by, you know. And something that a leader told me a long time ago that it's really stuck with me. If you see their life and you see the fruit of their lives and the things that they're doing in their life and the kind of person that they are in general, if you see that, and if you wouldn't ask them for advice, don't take their criticism either. You know what I'm saying? Because
Mhm.
it's some people just are never satisfied.
Yeah,
The
yeah,
truth of the matter is some people will never be happy. It's kind of the mentality of give an inch, take a mile kind of thing.
yeah.
And it's always easier to tell someone else what to do. And this is something that I've noticed as like I said, as I've been in church. It was easy for me to criticize everything that I saw, but it's a lot harder actually putting your hand to the plow and doing something about it. So actually like being a part of the solution,
Yeah.
actually saying, you know what, let me get involved and let me see why we do this in the first place. And maybe there's a good reason. Sometimes there's not always, sometimes it's just a convenience thing, but sometimes it is a valid reason, right? So like, oh man, why doesn't this church listen to every suggestion that I make? Well, on the back end, you don't know if the church is even making enough money to even pay their rent.
Yeah.
Maybe they can't implement that kind of stuff, right? I know we're a baby church. We're only 3 years old at my church. The budget is tight. The budget is tight. Like no one's getting paid for anything. Like it's not like we're getting rich off of people's money. Where everything goes into rent, everything goes into fixing things, everything goes into we have a recovery home. We help people who are drug addicts, alcoholics, people just homeless living on the streets, and we offer them a place to stay. It takes money to have someone stay with you. It takes money to feed them, clothe them, make sure they have clean water. I mean, to take a shower, like all that takes money. And so it may be easy for you to say, like, oh, I don't like the way that this church does this, this, and this. If only they change this, this, and this. Like, well, it's not in the budget. Like,
Yeah.
I'm
At the end of
so
the
sorry.
day,
Yeah, yeah. So like, just that's just one example of that kind of mentality of like you can't please everyone. And at the end of the day, right, like as believers, we know we're accountable for ourselves. We're accountable for our own life, our own walk with the Lord. We're gonna stand before the Lord one day, and we're gonna answer to the decisions that we've made, right? No one's gonna be there with you to plead your case.
yeah.
So you have to be really confident that the decisions that you made were the right decisions and not influenced by external forces, but because you know that you were earnestly following the voice of the Lord in your life.
True.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's true. You
Mhm.
mentioned a lot of things, and
I know, I'm sorry. I
yeah,
feel like
you're
I was
good.
yapping,
No, you're good. You're
rambling.
good. There was something that came to mind, and I lost my train of thought
Mhm.
because I wanted to elaborate on it. It had to do with criticizing and commenting.
Yeah.
Well, it's two different things, but
Right.
first one, I'm gonna write it down before I forget.
Okay.
So yeah, the authority.
Mhm.
Okay, that's the second one. So one of the things that came to mind when you mentioned like us criticizing
Mhm.
is it's not a bad thing to criticize. It's not a bad thing to have opinions,
Right.
though you want to be able to act upon those opinions. It's like, hey,
Right.
I just noticed, and it's how you approach the situation. He was
Yes,
like, hey, I
100%.
noticed, I noticed this is going on. Why is that?
Hmm.
And sometimes it's like a
Yeah.
financial issue. Sometimes it's they haven't made time.
Hmm.
And if you it's something that you're personally affected by, it's like, hey,
Yeah.
if you give me the opportunity, let me take action to help out
Hmm.
to prevent
Hmm.
that criticism to happen again.
Hmm.
So it creates that open opportunity, that curiosity and knowledge, if that
Oh,
makes
of
sense.
course. Of course. And like I think it's beautiful how you said it. It's like one thing to have opinions, it's another thing to be critical with your opinions, right?
Mhm.
It's all about the heart of what you're trying to do with that, right? Because if you're just pointing out everything, it's easy to point out everything that's wrong.
Yeah.
It's easy to say like, oh, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. Um, but well, the hope is that we're inviting people into this life. We're inviting people into life. We're inviting people into relationship. We're inviting people to be a part of. And so if you see those things, help us. Like I said, we're a small church and this happens all the time. People are like, oh, why don't we have an event for recently we had to cancel a Labor Day event, right? And I think it was Labor Day. It could be it would have one of those
One of the
holidays,
recent
one of those
holidays.
recent
Yeah.
holidays. It's like, oh man, we had to cancel that event. And people are like, "Oh man, why did we cancel that event?" I'm like, "Well, no one signed up to help. Like,
At the
like
end of the day,
like you guys can be mad at us for canceling the event, but at the end of the day, no one was able to step up and actually help put on the event. Like, it takes a lot of work. And so we're asking, like, if you see those issues, we're not gonna confront and be like, oh, you should like listen to your pastor and you should follow us and do everything we say. No, if you have those opinions, great. I'm glad that you have input,
mhm.
but now let's do something about it. Are you gonna help us get there? Are you gonna help us implement whatever those ideas are? Because we're already stretched thin as it is.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like it's like kind of
Mhm.
moving away from like that church because like yeah, some
Mhm.
people don't follow church.
Oh, of course, yeah.
Um,
Mhm.
you have people who are in a community,
Yeah.
work, for
Mhm.
example.
Yeah.
They are all there for the same goal.
Right.
And if you're not part of that same goal or
Hmm.
vision,
Hmm.
you may have a different perspective
Hmm. Yeah.
and wonder like why are we doing things a certain
Hmm.
way?
Yeah.
And that ties into like another, maybe it doesn't tie in, but I'm gonna make it tie in.
Okay.
The other thing that came to mind is like accepting criticism and feedback from
Hmm.
people.
Of course.
So I read it in the book, and I'm gonna butcher it,
Hmm.
that your best supporters sometimes are the ones that are complete strangers that don't know anything about you.
Yeah.
Because they'll say, like, hey, this is an idea, this is good, or this is pretty rubbish.
Hmm.
Don't ever do this.
Right.
They don't have that relational connection with you, which
Hmm.
isn't a bad thing. But
Hmm.
when it comes to criticism and receiving feedback from people,
Yeah.
you want to see, is this someone that has something I want?
Right.
I remember when I was under someone,
Hmm.
and this ties into like just with me having accountability and
Hmm.
being undercover, we would say,
Yeah.
being under someone is like, do they have something I want?
Right.
And the person that I was under
Hmm.
didn't have a relationship, was
Right.
looking for a job. Great person
Yeah.
still,
Hmm.
but I wanted to get married. I wanted to have a stable
Right.
job. I
Right.
was in school.
Yeah.
We had a lot of different things
Hmm.
that a lot of different visions.
Right.
So it wasn't a good, I wasn't under a good authoritative partner.
Hmm.
So great person, I still love him to pieces,
Hmm.
but I needed to find someone who had a wife, who had a relationship
Right.
with God, who had a child, who has all these things I don't have at that moment.
Right.
So
Yeah. And that's so important, right? Because we as people, we can't lead anyone where we haven't gone ourselves. That's just base principle of leadership. Leaders lead,
yeah.
and they lead you to a place that they've been to, right? I can't lead anyone anywhere I haven't been. Like you're saying, I
Mhm.
can't lead someone like how to have a healthy relationship and marriage. I've never been married. All
He's
my
like, we got no
advice,
rings.
I got no rings here. Yeah, you know what I'm saying? That was perfect. Yeah. I don't know where to go from
No, no, no.
there.
That kind of ties
Yeah.
into like our next comment.
Yeah.
Do you need to have power to have authority?
Um,
Are they interchangeable?
it, so I think when I think of someone in a position of power, I think of someone who has the ability to affect change in your life,
Mhm.
right? So I think of like the law, like a judge being able to sign off, like now you have to spend this much time in jail, or
Right.
you have to pay this fine, or you have to, do this or that, right? I think that works and is necessary for a society for us to function and to, have order, like law and order in the streets, right? Otherwise, we'd have anarchy.
Anarchy.
People would be doing whatever they want. People would be hurting each other, I feel like what people don't understand is that it's necessary because at the core of every human being is just this innate selfishness.
At the end
At
of the day,
the
yeah.
end of the
Yeah.
day, it's this innate, like, I need to make sure that I'm okay. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It becomes a bad thing when, in order to fulfill what you want, starts to hurt other people, and it starts to take away from other people,
It
and
becomes your top priority.
it becomes your top priority to like destroy other people so that you can elevate yourself, right? So that's why law and order exists, so that things like that don't happen.
Checks and
Checks and
balances.
balances, exactly.
History lesson right there.
Please read the history book. Please understand why the system works the way it does
Yeah.
before you criticize it. Side
Side
note,
note.
side note.
Like
But
you're a
yeah.
history teacher, right?
No, but I'm deeply invested. But I think that power is important as well. If you're talking about power as far as influence, then yes, it is important too, because like I said, there you can have a boss who looks great on paper, um, but is terrible with people, doesn't have authority with people, doesn't have power with people because they don't have that relationship with people.
Mhm.
And it just doesn't work out. People don't want to respect that. People don't want to listen to that. People, it's frustrating when a person like that, like in the workforce, a manager who cares nothing about you, says
Yeah.
something. It's like, you get the eye rolls and you're like, I guess,
It's
and
like
then
I've heard this
yeah,
before.
and you get the dragging your feet, like not really wanting to help,
Mhm.
right? But when you have someone who has that authority with people, who has that relationship with people, who has the ability to say, you know what, hey, as a team, I think we need to do this, and you know that they have your back, you're more likely to have their back, and let's work together towards this goal.
Mhm.
So it just depends on your definition of power, but I think it is important. It is important. right? And of course, it's something that can be abused very easily
as well,
as
right?
well. So that's why it's some things are just necessary, but it's us who corrupts the things.
At the end of the
At the
day.
end of the day, it's us that corrupts the things. So we have to be aware of that and recognize like sometimes it's bad, but it's necessary. And if
Mhm.
you don't like it, and if it's becoming to an extreme where you have a valid reason, I'm not saying, some reasons are invalid. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Some reasons to hate your managers and to hate your bosses sometimes are invalid. Sometimes it's just because we're whiny.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say it, and I feel like I can say that because that was me. No matter who it was, that was my boss. They could be the best person. I'm like, man, why are they telling me what to do? It wasn't because they were bad people. It was because I was a brat. You know what I'm saying? So, but if there was a legitimate reason and a legitimate abuse of power, then we have the ability to walk away. You don't have to subject yourself to that.
I think
Yeah.
this is kind of tying to my lack of history knowledge.
Right.
Democracy is that like for the people
Hmm.
that the person is put into power,
Hmm.
into authority
Hmm.
because we on paper, this is how it's supposed to be,
Right.
that we vote for this person
Right.
to be in power.
So if you're talking about democracy in general, the United States is not a pure democracy.
Right.
Pure democracy is that, right? We vote and everyone's vote is counted, and then whoever is the majority is the winner, right? Um, that isn't what we are as the United States, because a pure democracy is very dangerous. Because a pure democracy, if you can get enough people to hate a certain group of people, that group of people no longer exists,
Mhm.
right? That's what was happening. Like they would just wipe out any and all political candidates if they garnered enough popularity and support. We are a representative democracy or a republic, right? So we vote for people to represent us. So that's why we have the Senate. Every state has two representatives, and then we have the House of Representatives, which is based off of population of your state. So you have um, your state is represented by your population, and so that's a system of checks and balances. So that in the Senate, at least everyone has two, everyone's equal on that front. But on the other side, in the House, right, you're represented by a population.
Right.
That way, that you know something that affects, a rural town in Nebraska somewhere may not even have anything to do with you. So there's no reason for their vote to matter
As much.
more than yours when they're not dealing with the same issues, like especially here in California with such a big population, right? And we have a lot of other things we have to worry about when it comes to um, just lifestyle, pricing, affordability, all that kind of stuff is different.
Gas
Yeah.
prices.
Oh yeah, big thing. Yeah, yeah. So that's why we're and then it the goal and the intent is to minimize that really to really protect the minority groups of people so
Mhm.
that they're equally and fairly represented in Congress.
Which is interesting too,
Hmm.
because you talk about minority groups and
Hmm.
people think like
Hmm.
minority groups, this is like state, like worldwide, but
Hmm.
goes into those states. Like each state has a minority group.
Right.
And some people, I won't even get into that, but yeah, that's another conversation for another time and day.
Right.
Um, yeah, it's really important. Just going back to like knowing why, being curious on knowing why things are happening the way they are.
Right.
And if things aren't working, we have that choice. We have that freedom,
Hmm.
especially in the United
Right.
States, that we have that freedom to say, hey, I
Hmm.
don't like this.
Right.
What can we do to change it?
Right. Of
This is why
course.
we have protests. This is why,
Hmm.
unfortunately, we get into riots sometimes because
Hmm.
our voices aren't being heard.
Right.
But nowadays, too, you have riots
Hmm.
and protests because yeah, yeah, I'm just
Yeah.
gonna leave it how that is.
Yeah, and it's true. I understand that sometimes like peaceful protests that Martin Luther King uh that he implemented, right? It wasn't necessarily because he wanted to destroy the system that was in place. It's because how him and his people were being treated was very blatantly unfair,
Mhm.
right? And so he needed to make a stand, and he needed to get people to join him in making that stand that we need change,
Mhm.
right? And so certain things, like I said, certain things are valid, certain things are not valid. Some certain things are do your research.
Yeah.
Do your research. I'm going to say some very crazy things, but do your research. Unfortunately, people don't understand that they're being lied to.
Yeah.
If you look at the numbers, if you follow the numbers, if you follow the money, you will see there's an agenda at the end of it all. An
Always a
agenda.
plan.
There's
There's
always
always a
an
plan.
agenda and a plan. And you need to be aware of if it's actually going to be beneficial to you and your family and your the people that you surround.
Mhm.
Right. That's all I'll say about that.
Yeah.
Be informed. Be the most informed that you can be before making any kind of decisions like that.
True. Look
Yeah.
for the long-term benefits instead of the
Yeah.
short-term gain.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Because yeah, so sometimes the short term solutions don't always lead to long-term success, right? So
Yeah.
short term um in the economy, let's say in the economy, right? Um Short term is like, oh, I'm gonna get rid of all of your student debt. Long term, that's awful because we as the taxpayers are paying off that debt.
Yeah.
Money
It's like,
doesn't
where's that
just
money coming from?
Exactly. Money doesn't just disappear.
Yeah.
Debt doesn't just disappear. It has to be paid back.
Yeah.
Right. And so guess who's paying it all back? The American taxpayers.
Why
People,
taxes are getting
that's
higher.
why
Inflation is
taxes,
getting higher.
exactly,
I
exactly.
remember this
Hmm.
conversation, not this conversation exactly, but we
Hmm.
were talking about this was back in 2017, 2018. This is before community colleges became free, like
Hmm.
at least the 2-year programs,
Hmm.
where the conversation was, should college be free?
Hmm.
Should students have free access to free education?
Right,
And on the one side, I was like, yes, that's amazing.
right,
On the second hand, who's going to pay for that?
right,
How are we going to be funded by that? And it's
exactly.
not a bad thing. Like we
Hmm.
have other countries like in Denmark and
Hmm.
Sweden,
Hmm.
some of the top
Hmm.
education programs out
Right,
there.
right.
Their education is free.
Hmm.
At the same time, the taxes are high.
Yeah.
So
Hmm.
it's what's the
Yeah.
benefit? What are you willing to
Yes.
sacrifice?
Exactly. And that's where I'm saying informed decision making is necessary. If you're okay with raising, I'm okay if you present to me like this is why I want to do this, and you're okay with the taxes rising because of it. You're honest and you made that decision, and I appreciate the honesty and the fact that you did your research and the fact that you were willing to take on that extra taxes because this is something you believed in, right? So I respect that 100%. I don't like I don't like when, like, oh yeah, college should be free, healthcare should be free, all of this should be free to me, and then they look at the taxes skyrocketing, they look at the price of goods skyrocketing, and they're like, huh? Why? Well, I can't even afford to live. I'm like, this is a consequence of that decision, though.
Mm.
So I want you to be honest and do your research and make those decisions based off of the long term, right? And because we see it, I have a Canadian friend, right? And they have free healthcare, but they also have ridiculously high taxes,
Mm.
right? They keep, maybe, I want to say they said something about tax at 50 something percent,
That's huge.
like literally half of all of their income a year is taken, right? And so many people don't like to talk about universal health care in
Yeah.
Canada, right? People who are wealthy still buy private insurance because it's easier to see a doctor. When the system is free and everyone has access, it's impacted so greatly, and it's government funded, so the doctors don't have an incentive to actually work there. They're not actually getting paid a decent amount of money, so there's a shortage in medical staff, and so all of their hospitals are impacted. She had to get some kind of medical work done. She couldn't get an appointment for 2.5 months, 3 months almost. And that's just the reality of not thinking through the consequences of what happens. So I'm all for a more affordable healthcare. I'm all for all of that stuff. But we have to look at how we're going to get there because the how is really what matters more than the actual end goal.
Mhm.
Because if you're saying it's free, it's not, nothing's ever really
Nothing's
free
free. Yeah,
because
there's always a cost to it.
exactly, because doctors need to get paid, nurses need to get paid, the janitors need to get paid, the cook staff in the hospital need to get paid. That money needs to come from somewhere. And if we're saying that it's free, like when you go to the doctor and you don't have to pay anything, you're paying for it as a taxpayer in
Someone's
it's
paying
from
something.
your paycheck directly. Someone's paying them.
You
So
gotta follow the money somewhere.
exactly, exactly. So
Yeah, no,
yeah.
that's huge. And
I'm
kind
sorry,
of
I'm ranting, huh?
no, we digress into another
Okay.
conversation, which is good. It
I'm
works
so
at the end of the
sorry.
day.
Yeah.
But this
Hmm.
ties into our last, well, it does
Hmm.
not tie into our last question, but it has to do with people.
Hmm.
So it does tie in
Hmm.
somehow if you
Hmm.
do the math. Shout
Yeah.
out to math people.
Right.
Um, why do we struggle with authority?
Uh,
Yeah.
Personally, yeah, no.
Just like as simple as
As
that.
simple as that. Honestly, personally, I think like in my situation, right, because of bad authority, bad examples of authority, abuse of authority that we've experienced. I think we talked about it earlier, our Western civilization, super hyper independent, right? And I think honestly, what I can see, just like the lack of wanting to take responsibility, lack of accountability, lack of admitting that we're wrong. Sometimes
That's a
admitting
big
that
one.
we're wrong is the hardest thing because it's a blow to the ego, it's a blow to the pride, that we have, that we all kind of want to think that we're great. That's just innate. We all want to think that we're great and we don't do anything that's like, because a lot of times when we make mistakes, it's not intentional, right? But we had to realize that we do make mistakes and we do have sometimes our way of thinking isn't the correct way of thinking.
Yeah.
And sometimes we need an outside perspective to show us our blind spots. We as human beings, we all have blind spots. I have a lot of issues, and when I wanted to grow and develop, and I asked someone who I saw like, man, I want the kind of life that you have. I asked them to mentor me, and it sucks, and it hurts, and it hurts so much to be told like, well, you're doing this wrong, you're doing that wrong, you're doing this wrong, like this way of thinking is wrong, like you're not going to get to where you want to go the longer you stay the same, right? And it hurts. It doesn't feel
Really
good
does.
to have it all laid out in front of you like that. But it's necessary for growth. It's necessary for you to move forward. And yeah,
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 growth is painful,
growth is painful.
but it's at the end of the day, it's worth it.
Yes.
I think of like a literal example, like if your body's growing,
Hmm.
it's gonna hurt
Oh yeah.
because your body's adjusting. You don't want to
Hmm.
say
Hmm.
short, no offense to short people, but
Listen, Mario.
yeah, it's like, hey,
Hey, hey, hey, leave my people alone.
leave
Let's
my
get
tiny people alone.
leave my short kings alone.
But if you don't want to stay small
Hmm.
and be in the same, but be same person,
Yeah.
you want to grow, you want to become a better individual.
Yeah.
Hopefully, I mean, if you
Hopefully.
want to stay the same, then
Yeah.
you can do that too.
Yeah, of course.
No shame there, but
Yeah.
most people follow someone that has a plan and
Right.
that is growing and is
Hmm.
okay with saying, "Hey, I effed up, I messed up,
Hmm.
I'm sorry," and
Hmm.
even ask like, "What do you think
Hmm.
could have been better?"
Right. Yeah, exactly. And I think it's even asking someone to help you, it's the most humbling experience that you'll ever have to go through
Yeah.
because you have to admit that you're not where you want to be. You have to admit it to yourself and you have to admit it to another person. And I think something you said is just like you hit the nail on the head. You have to have that desire to grow. Some people literally generally don't have a desire to change, right? They don't have a desire to grow. They don't, and it goes back to that pride. They don't think that there's anything wrong.
Yeah.
You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? And it's something that, you can't help someone who doesn't think they need to be helped. So you kind of just got to let them live their own life until they see, like, okay, maybe I'm not getting the results I want out of my life. But that has to be natural, something that comes from them, from within them. Um, yeah. And one thing that I will say though, like I had a big issue with a pastor. I didn't like the way they talked to me. I didn't like the way that they were always telling me what to do. I didn't like the way that they kind of, it felt like at the time, it felt like in the moment that they were very critical of me as a person, right? But I'm so thankful now that I stuck around, that I made a decision like, you know what? This person's been a pastor for years. This person has led a church for years. This person has a home. They're a homeowner. They have a wife. They have kids. They're
They have a lot of things that
they
you
got a
want.
lot of they exactly. They have a lot of things that I want. And you know what? So I was like, you know what? I'm gonna take a step back. I'm gonna put my ego aside. I'm gonna put my feelings aside, and I'm gonna just start making little adjustments, starts to see what happens as I make these adjustments. And so as I became open and I started implementing them in my life, I'm like, I was a selfish. I realized at the end of it, I was like super selfish. I didn't know that my life was so small. I didn't recognize that all of the issues that I needed to work on and deal with. But I also discovered that I was capable of far more than I ever thought. Right. I from that pastor, I learned how to do so many things. I learned to open up as a person. I used to not be able to public speak at all. Um, but that leader saw me in other settings, in other like one-on-one situations, and they're like, you're gifted in mentoring people, you're gifted in talking to people, you're gifted in explaining and teaching people things, right? Now we need to break you out of your shell so that you can do it on a greater scale. And like that's not something that ever would have come from me. But when I open up myself to hear that leader's instruction and then also allow them in to take a peek at what's going on in my life, they were able to show something in me that I didn't even see in myself. And I can honestly say I'm in a better position spiritually, mentally, emotionally, just in what I do someone who works in ministry. I'm in a better position because I submitted myself to that pastor. And so sometimes that's necessary. People don't see that. Some people don't see that as a possibility either. When you submit to authority, it's to refine us. It's to grow us. It's to put us in a better position. And we don't. It's so counterintuitive because we think, oh, if someone has power over us, that means we're gonna get smaller. No, if it's done correctly, they come up and help you become the best version of yourself.
Usually, in most cases, some of the highest successful people, the people on the top, are also the most humbling and kind and caring.
Yes. They I think it's John Maxwell as well. I think John Maxwell, John Bevere. I know for sure John Bevere, there's a person that he hires to speak to him and his wife and his team every year. He's a leadership development coach. He's a minister, church planter. He's done all of the things in leadership and ministry, right? He used to help in school boards. He used to be a principal. He used to help turn schools around so that they would improve, right? He was like a consultant in that way. And so John Bevere, he's like, he says, if I want people to grow, I need to show them that I have the humility to submit myself to someone else and allow someone else to teach me and correct me and help me grow so that I can model it to someone else so that they can see like this is not because I want to control you in your life. I want you to be the best version of you that you
Lead
can.
by example.
Lead by example. Exactly. Your cat is so cute.
She is sleeping this whole time. I was expecting her to like there's claws. She's like, hey, shut up.
Yeah, I know, right?
Shush. Yeah. Do you have anything to say, Fuzzball? Guess not.
Guess not.
Well, that does wrap up the time that we have for today.
Oh well.
Thank you. You're amazing.
Thank you for having me. I feel like I rambled. I'm so sorry
I think we
if I
both
did.
did. It was like a conversational,
Yeah.
but we're here. We both have the power. So
I got the power.
shameless plug. Yeah.
Sorry.
But if you guys have issues with authority, don't go to us because
Or do.
maybe
Or
true.
do.
You could.
We're actively pursuing change. Yes. So
True. So maybe, yeah.
So
maybe
maybe.
that's a good idea.
maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, get yourself an accountability partner. Just start small. You don't even have to start big.
Right.
Just be okay with change
Right.
at the end of the day.
Right. And then hang around some toddlers. And if you want to see what it looks like to have no order, no control, no authority, just let them do whatever they want for 24 hours and watch how destroyed everything in your life and your household is. That's why authority is important.
Yeah, there it is. As simple as that.
Simple as that.
So yeah, again, thank you guys for watching. PSA, pass a smile, stay safe, always be awesome, and we'll see you guys next time.
Peace.
Want to say bye real quick?
Bye.
Yeah, right?
She's staring at me. I'm
She's
sorry.
like, how dare